What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Tuesday, July 29th. Hope you guys have had a good day. I've been going through all the files for days now, and I'd started putting the tips that were received into a folder, and I thought today we would go through some of the tips that law enforcement and the FBI were getting. So let's jump in. This report is by Brett Payne. On Wednesday, March 13th, 2024, I received an email from Captain Blaker, who still receives voicemail tips referencing this case. Captain Blaker sent me 2 tips for additional follow-up. The first tip was called in by somebody whose first initial is K. She stated she thought she had matched with BK in September or October of 2022 on Tinder. I called and asked her to elaborate on her voicemail. She stated she signed up for Tinder in September or October of 2022, but was unable to match with anyone in her area. She paid for the additional Tinder feature, which allowed her to move a pin anywhere in the country to see if she could match with someone. She stated she matched with BK a short time later and began talking to him. She said BK told her he was a criminology student at WSU. The two communicated via Tinder and planned for BK to visit when he came home for Christmas break that year. She then told me she had a friend who had been murdered in her town a couple of years prior. She said she discussed this with BK. The conversation turned to horror movies and which ones she liked the most. She told BK she liked the Rob Zombie Halloween movies. To this, she said BK asked what she thought would be the worst way to die. She said she thought it would be a knife. She said BK then asked her something to the effect of like a K-bar. She said she didn't know what that was and had to Google it. She eventually stopped talking to BK because his questions made her uncomfortable. She said when BK was arrested, she recognized his photo and remembered the comment about the K-bar knife. She said she attempted to call the tip line, but I have been unable to verify whether or not she called the Moscow PD tip line. There is no record of her calling the FBI tip line. She said she no longer had access to her Tinder profile and could not get her user ID. This would be needed to compare the Tinder records located on BK's phone. At this time, there is nothing to corroborate this tip. The second tip was a reference to its redacted driver. Initials are SS, who thought he saw BK. I called and asked him to tell me what he saw. He said he delivers packages to the area of Pullman where BK resided during 2022. He said he recognized BK and had seen him while delivering packages to the area on prior occasions. He told me on the occasion he referenced in his tip, he noticed a man dressed in all black with boxing or elf shoes standing on a footpath behind a certain street. This footpath provided an unobstructed view of apartment, that's redacted, where the man said the female tenants would be visible through a large window. He said seeing the man, who he said looked like BK from what he could see, was unusual given the location. He said he was not positive the man was BK, but he resembled BK's appearance. He informed me he spoke to an FBI investigator early on, but wanted to make sure the information was passed on. I concluded my phone interview with him and thanked him. The next tip, the report was written by Brett Payne. On June 29th, 2024, I attempted to contact Redacted in reference to a tip she emailed into the tip line. She claimed to have tangible proof BK was framed. She didn't answer when I called her on June 29th, 2024, so I left a voicemail. I did not receive a return call. I attempted to call again on July 30th, 2024. Upon calling, someone answered the phone, did not say anything, then hung up quickly before I could speak. At the time of this writing, I am unable to contact her. I will investigate further if I'm able to get in contact with her. The next one, also written by Brett Payne. On June 30th, 2024, I received an email containing a voice tip referencing this case. I listened to the attached file. A woman stated her name was redacted with a phone number of redacted. She stated she had information that would clear BK of the homicides. She didn't state what this information was and requested a phone call. On July 1st, 2024, I attempted to call to interview her about her statements. She didn't answer, but there was an option to leave a voicemail, though the message didn't state who the number belonged to. I left a voicemail with my work cell phone number and identified who I was. I requested they call me back. At the time of this report, I have not received a phone call from her. Again, Brett Payne. On Monday, November 11th, 2024, I was notified via email from Sergeant Gunderson that a woman whose name is redacted had called Whitcomb with information relating to this case. More specifically, she alleged she could exonerate BK. She hung up with dispatch prior to them gathering further information. The call notes are as follows. Caller is advising she's trying to reach the attorney for BK. She was a mandated reporter/victim advocate and is advising that she has information that would prove his innocence. She sent the attorney a letter to reach someone that can confirm they're representing BK, attorney/Ann Taylor Law Offices. I called her when I returned to duty on November 14th, 2024. I advised her of who I was and asked if she could relate the information she claimed to have. She told me she sent a letter to Ann Taylor's office with the information and would not disclose what she knew to me. I advised her it was my obligation to learn of possible exculpatory evidence. She told me she had never met BK or spoken to him, but she knew he was not the person who committed the murders. I attempted to explain why it was important for me to know of the information she had, but she would only tell me to do a Freedom of Information Act request so you can learn my maiden name. She also stated if I did, the FBI would immediately contact me. I asked her if she had contacted the FBI, to which she replied she had not, but they would know who as soon as I searched her name. She then said she didn't want any further involvement and hung up on me. Based off her inability or unwillingness to offer any information to be substantiated or investigated further, there is no further avenue to proceed referencing this call. This is Brett Payne again. On December 5th, 2024, I was made aware of a tip reported during this investigation. The tip contained a screenshot of a thread of comments on an Instagram post. The user had posted progress pictures for weightlifting. A person by the name of Redacted posted a response that stated, "Why did you kill those kids?" To which Redacted responded by saying, "For fun." I searched this Instagram profile and could not locate the post in question nor the comments associated. I called Redacted on Monday, December 9th, 2024, and asked him about the post. He said the account wasn't his. He stated he only had one Instagram account under the username Redacted, and he rarely used it. I was able to find this profile, which was private, and the profile photo appeared to more closely resemble him than the Redacted account. I asked if he ever lifted weights or posted about it. He said he's never been much of a weightlifter and again stated the account was not his. I thanked him for talking to me and ended our conversation. This is Brett Payne. On Friday, December 2nd, 2024, Redacted came into the Moscow Police Department and requested to speak to me referencing a tip concerning the homicides. I spoke to her in the police department lobby. I did not record our conversation. She began by sliding me a note that asked if Moscow PD was looking for a second person who could be responsible for the homicides. The note described a male, and the bottom said, if Moscow PD was not looking for another person, to slide the note back to her, and she would leave. I told her it was our duty to investigate tips that could result in exculpatory information. She reluctantly slid me another stack of handwritten letters. I read most of these letters and learned they concerned 3 redacted names. The letter described how Redacted had lived near 1122 King Road approximately 6 months prior to the homicides and had made comments to her about how the parties kept him up at night. Redacted also wrote, Redacted had been behaving strangely after the homicides and had injuries to his hands. The rest of the letters concerned the person's other behavior and suspected hacking activities, according to her. She also stated she gave consent for her DNA kits she submitted in reference to a past unrelated report from August 2022 to be used. In talking with her, I learned the person's strange behaviors, not talking to her for extended periods of time, showing her memes at strange times, riding his scooter to Pullman had been ongoing for several years prior to the homicides. She seemed concerned he had psychotic tendencies and made her nervous at times. She stated he wore gloves and almost always had wounds on his hand and face on more than one occasion, which he stated were from scooter crashes. Aside from the fact he lived near 1122 King Road, I later confirmed he lived at Redacted until June of 2022 and behaved strangely. She did not have any further reason to suspect him as being involved. She was mostly concerned about his ongoing strange behavior. I told her if his behavior ever made her fear for her life to call 911. She said she would do so. I thanked her for her time and she left the letters with me, which I have attached to the case. On July 20th, 2024, I contacted Redacted from Clarkston, Washington. She emailed a tip saying she had information about seeing BK the morning after the homicides. I called and asked her to tell me what she knew. She stated she was in Clarkston on November 13th, 2022 at approximately 10 a.m. and went to Albertsons there to pick up coffee and donuts. She said she saw the University of Idaho alert on Facebook as she was standing in line and called her boyfriend to tell him about it. It was at this point she noticed the man in front of her who she thought could have been BK. The man was wearing khaki pants, brown shoes, a salmon-colored button-up shirt, a surgical COVID-type mask, and purple surgical gloves. She said she didn't think anything of it at the time, but she thought she should let law enforcement know after seeing the photos of BK. She didn't have any further information regarding the incident. The next one, written by Dustin Blaker. On May 22nd, 2025, which obviously not too long ago, I received an email from prosecutor Bill Thompson with a request for contact from a redacted name. She wanted to report her daughter, whose name is redacted, and one of her friends saw photos of themselves on Dateline from the latest special in reference from the Moscow murders. I contacted her on May 22nd, 2025, and she responded and stated she would be available on May 23rd, 2025, but I was not able to contact her on that date. On May 29th, 2025, I called and spoke to her by phone. She told me her daughter watched the Dateline special, and when they were talking about photos of WSU students on BK's phone, the daughter was able to identify several of the photos of her and one of her friends as being photos reported to have been found on BK's phone. I asked if I could talk to her daughter, and she provided her daughter the phone. She told me the following. She was a student at WSU in the fall of 2022 and was in a class where BK was the teaching assistant. She was in a class with her friend whose name is redacted. The friend was interviewed by Idaho State Police Detective Jacob Schwecke on March 2nd, 2023. The daughter told me she had never talked to BK during the class, but he did sit in close proximity to her on the rare occasions he would attend class. She told me she thought BK was socially awkward, but was not able to provide me any other information about him. I asked her how she knew the photos were of her and her friend. She told me she watched the Dateline episode, and she was able to tell the photos, which she believed had been taken off of her Instagram account. She told me during 2022 her account was public, and this is possibly how BK found her photos. This next one can be a little hard to follow, but I spent about an hour trying to break it down to where it's more understandable. This one is from James Fry, and it was from December 13th, 2022 at approximately 8 p.m. I interviewed Redacted. The name starts with an S. He called me several days earlier to report some information he had regarding the quadruple homicide. I asked if the information he would be sharing would be dealing with one person. He told me it would. I asked if I could get the individual's name. He said the person's name was redacted. It starts with a G, and this person was later identified. He goes on to describe where he lives as well as the person, G, he was calling about. He began explaining to me that he had done a lot of work for DK, who is the prior owner of a redacted address. We're going to call DK Grandpa. He said he had been a friend of the family for many years and has done handyman jobs in the past for Grandpa. He told me in 2022 he drove Grandpa, his daughter Elle, and G, the subject of the call, up to a place the family goes to have a vacation almost every year. He told me after he got there, someone whose first name starts with R and is one of the Grandpa's sisters got into an altercation with a male who was camped near where they were. He told me it was a heated argument, but everyone eventually went back to their campsites. Later in the evening, he noticed the Grandpa's sister and the daughter were walking past the man's campsite, so he went up on the hill where he could observe and make sure nothing was going to happen. He told me he had been up on the hillside for several minutes in the dark when all of a sudden a man, G, just appeared out of nowhere. He said it startled him for a minute because he never heard or saw where the man came from. He told me G pulled out a knife to show him. It was a hunting-style knife. He had spoke to G, who had showed a great interest in having a career in the military. I asked if he could describe the knife to me, and he said it was a typical 7-inch blade used for hunting and skinning. He told me he heard G's grades in school had dropped and that his mom had been extremely verbally abusive to him. I asked how the mom and her son G would travel to Moscow from Boise. He told me he believed they would ride the bus when they traveled. He told me when they stayed in Moscow at the Grandpa's house, G and his sister would stay in the basement and Mom would sleep outside in one of the 2 sheds in the backyard. He told me the significance of all this was that G would keep his knives in the basement of the house, in the wood pile that was outside, or one of the 2 sheds in the backyard. He told me around the end of May or sometime in the middle of June, after COVID was letting up, he was at the Mag Greek having a late lunch or early dinner. This was on a Saturday or Sunday. He told me he ordered a glass of wine, which he is sure Ethan brought him. He told me he isn't sure if Ethan worked at the Mag Greek or was just helping out. He told me a little bit later he noticed that G came into the restaurant with someone who is his cousin. He told me Xana and Madison had gone over to G's table and Ethan later joined. He told me it appeared to be a heated conversation, but couldn't tell what it was about. He suspected it may have to do with the cancel culture and that G was stirring them up with conservative comments. He told me G left without eating anything. Later that night, around 9 or 10 p.m., the caller was at Grandpa's house in the backyard. He said the mom was extremely drunk and yelling at G. She stated, "You're just a loser and you're going to spend your life in jail. You're ruining your life." The caller wasn't sure what Mom was referencing when she said this. He told me G left right after this altercation and he didn't see him again. He said G goes on long walks and doesn't return until the early morning hours. The caller told me he was over at Grandpa's the next morning picking up some tarps from a job he had been doing, and G showed up. He asked G what he does after he leaves when his mom is yelling at him. G told him he goes over to the college. G believes the college is to blame for how his mom is. His mom went to parties at the college and began drinking. He doesn't know for sure, but he believes the mom may have been sexually assaulted at one of the college parties. He told me he asked G about the conversation that took place at the Mag Greek restaurant. He said G told him that he had followed the girls to the Mag Greek from the college. G told him the girls were lesbians. G told the man he had went back to the girls' house, and when they came home, he was inside the house and made the statement they had no idea that I was there. I could have killed them all if I wanted to. He told me G then went and got a larger knife from out of the back shed and showed him. He told me every time he was around G and G's mom would explode on him, he always stayed very calm and would not react to her. The next one is by Brett Payne. On January 23, 2024, one woman emailed the FBI tip line and said BK attended PhD courses at Oklahoma State University. She added she met BK during this time and BK had befriended a professor who gave BK a K-bar knife. I spoke to her on the phone March 2nd, 2023. I did not record the conversation. She relayed she met BK when Redacted brought him to her house for a visit. She stated BK made her very uncomfortable and she warned her friend about him. I asked her to email me anything she had to support her claim, and she emailed me the following information on March 2nd, 2023. It said, 2016 to 2017, University of Oklahoma began offering criminal justice bachelor degrees. BK found it cheaper to take the courses here that he needed for his degree. She lists the school phone number and says the dean who approved BK was redacted, since retired. Ask for dean above, and that name is redacted. Here is the information you must have. There is an ou.edu redacted email address. It says you will see the personal communication between redacted and BK. Pen trap phone number is redacted, and this is the friend's cell phone of 20 years. She lists these witnesses. One says something about martial arts and allow BK to attend class as someone's guest. Redacted allow BK to stay at home. Myself advised redacted that BK was homicidal and possibly had a psychotic break. Violent, sloppy ideation of violence towards others. I believe I contacted an FBI agent named Redacted, and Redacted alerted her. BK used a credit card to pay for courses and travel expenses. Subpoena his financial records. I'll have another report for you this afternoon with addresses, numbers, and any other evidence of visit. Redacted lies to investigators, period. He lied to Redacted, Virginia State Police, in a cold case murder investigation. He is a Krav Maga instructor and a predator. He encouraged BK and initiated him into brutality. I'm here to help Moscow, Idaho in any way possible, and I have faith in your competence as a chief of police. She lists a social security number and a date of birth. So at the bottom of the report, Payne writes, upon further investigation, it was learned the person had reported 36 tips to the FBI over the past several years. In addition, there is no current information to support BK ever attended Oklahoma State University. I will investigate further if information arises BK attended OSU at any point in time. These are so fascinating to me because clearly you have people that just have nothing to do and are calling in. And the sad thing is law enforcement has to investigate every single tip, no matter how out there they are. And that takes away from the investigation itself. Crazy stuff. Not all of these were like that, but y'all, a few of these had me going, oh my goodness. I'm sure there are more. These are what I could find just today, flipping through everything, trying to organize these files. But that's it for this episode. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we will see you soon.